All right. So next up, we've got Tershia de Klerk. Tershia has got 15 years of experience where she was in missionary work. She was part of the pro-life movement, got into fighting or combating human trafficking. There's actually just so much to say about Tershia, but she's just a wonderful, wonderful woman. And I think she's got so much knowledge and such a wonderful way of sharing that. So let's give the platform to Tershia. And again, if anybody's got questions, you're even welcome to ask throughout the session. We will read it then just at the end with the Q&A. All right. Over to you, Tershia.
Thank you very much, Juanita, and thank you so much to everyone who's given up their time to join us. So I just I'll be able to share my screen, am I right? Juanita, okay, I'm just sharing my screen with you. Okay, wonderful. All right, so I am speaking on human trafficking with you today. So I want to give you some interesting facts and just give you an idea of what human trafficking looks like and some ideas of how one can combat it. So human trafficking is actually a form of modern day slavery. And what exactly is human trafficking? So human trafficking takes place when a person is either forced, misled, coerced, or even manipulated for the blatant use of their body or for their labor. So that is a simple description of what human trafficking is. And the different phases of human trafficking. Most of us, especially when we speak to people about human trafficking, the first thing that seems to come to mind is sex trafficking and labor trafficking, and often people that are found in containers and taken over borders, or even children that are abducted from schools. However, that does take place, but human trafficking is so much wider than that. So we get the sex trafficking and the labor trafficking. Then there's also domestic servitude. We've got forced marriage, forced begging, organ harvesting and baby harvesting, or also known as baby farms. Then we have child soldiers, forced illegal activities. So that also just gives us an idea of how wide human trafficking is. And then we have snuff movies, as well as what they call bachabazi. So I am going to go a little bit more into detail on all of these in a little while. And then we have to remember child trafficking or child abuse is something that we are all obligated, according to legislation, to report. So if we are aware of any form of human trafficking or child abuse that takes place, or even just told by someone, according to the law of South Africa, we are legally obligated to report it. So human trafficking is the second largest crime in the world, and it's also the fastest growing illegal or organized crime enterprise in the world. And what's interesting, in South Africa, we have an act known as the Pakotip Act, and it is actually considered the best form of legislation in the world. However, unfortunately, tongue-in-cheek with our government, it is not being implemented properly. So the main elements of this act all revolves around the act, the means, and the purpose. And there's a lot of detail that one can go into those three aspects, but if you are really interested in really studying it in detail, you are welcome to go and Google this act and just study it more in detail. But once again, I'm going to go back. The simple definition of human trafficking, if you're ever unsure whether a situation is a human trafficking situation, you ask yourself, is this person being forced, misled, coerced, or manipulated for the use of their body or for their labor? And if you can answer yes to that question, then it is most probably human trafficking. And a very interesting fact around human trafficking that we have to remember is that transportation is actually not necessary for a situation to be labeled as human trafficking. A lot of people are very surprised about this fact, but that is a very important fact to remember, because a person can be groomed online in the comfort of their own home, and they can eventually, with escalation, they can eventually fall prey or be tricked into a situation where they are exploited. And that is classified as human trafficking. Or another example, especially what we found in some of the more disadvantaged communities, is that children are prostituted out of their own homes. And that is also a form of human trafficking. So just some very interesting but disturbing stats around human trafficking. So we know that over 45 million people are currently trapped around the globe in human trafficking. And that is 5 out of every 1,000 in the world that fall victim or prey to human trafficking. And then to just narrow it down more, every 30 seconds, a person gets trafficked. In South Africa, at any given time, we have approximately 155,000 people who are trapped in human trafficking at any given time in our country. And we also know that the average price is apparently $1,000 US dollars for a victim or a slave. And also from the reliable statistics, we have found that only 2% of people ever get saved or ever get extracted from a human trafficking situation. And that is why prevention is absolute key. So human trafficking is a very difficult crime to combat. And once again, that is why prevention is very important. Human trafficking is often overshadowed by other crimes, such as the drug trade, for instance. Victims also often do not ask for assistance because of fear. We see that very much in the sex trade as well. Some, especially foreigners, can't easily find help or ask for help because of the language barrier. And then in some extreme cases, especially within the sex trafficking industry, the victims are so traumatized that they eventually do not realize that they are in fact victims. And then another situation that we need to keep in mind is that in many cases, victims would resort to perks, which would then result in them being, their abuse being reduced, and that will then escalate them into becoming a trafficker themselves. So these are just some of the reasons why we say that human trafficking is a hidden crime. And some very interesting statistics that we received from the UN from the latest report is we often tend to just naturally point a finger at the men. But here we can see that the perpetrators of human trafficking, when it comes to men, and this is once again only those that we know of, are 62% men and 38% of them are female. So when it comes to South Africa, we need to remember that each country is obviously unique in itself. So the main factors in South Africa that actually fuels human trafficking is high unemployment, weak and corrupt borders. Muti is one factor. And then we also have cultural practices, and then obviously technology and pornography. So just to quickly go through a summary of these phases of human trafficking. So sex trafficking is, once again, it is all based on being forced, misled, coerced, or manipulated, in this case, into performing commercial sex acts. And, you know, the individuals who buy commercial sex, they actually create the demand for sex trafficking. They are the root of sex trafficking. If there are no buyers, then sex trafficking will fall flat on its face. We also know, just to add to what Clive mentioned, you know, popular media, including books, movies, music, and so on, they actually tend to glamorize the commercial sex industry. And what that does is it creates a bigger demand. And where there's a demand, the sex traffickers are going to respond. So they are going to respond with the so-called product. And the product to a sex trafficker are the people that they exploit, which are mostly women and children, but also in some cases, men. So not only the traffickers, but also the sex buyers should be held accountable. And that is an aspect that is currently lacking in South Africa. So once again, thanks to the UN reports, they've given us statistics that they know of, which you can see here. Women are those that are mostly exploited, and then girls, boys, and then men. Boys are lower on the scale, but we see that there is a dramatic increase in sexual exploitation of boys and men as well, such as what Clive mentioned. So yes, so sex buyers have to be kept or held accountable, and this will then demand a reduction in the sex trade. Apparently $99 billion is pocketed by sex trafficking across the globe every single year. And that's an average of $100 per transaction. Now, the sad part about human trafficking is that a human can be sold over and over again. That is why we talk about transaction. And that is then roughly $1 billion 1 billion instances of sexual exploitation that happens each year. So in South Africa, as I mentioned, we have the Pakkertip Act and also the Sexual Offences Act, but we desperately need to also start targeting the sex buyers, because currently the people who are trapped in prostitution are those who not only are being abused and victimized, but they are being targeted by authorities and not the sex buyers. So we strongly believe that pornography is a public health issue, and so does a number of other NGOs that are really trying to combat the complete delegalization, yes, of pornography behind the scenes. As I've said, the evolving technology has really fueled online pornography. And there are some extremities that are starting to really surface and be normalized when it comes to pornography, such as, incest, racism, abuse, of extreme proportions when it comes to online pornography. I'm sorry, my furry babies want to join the conversation. So there are also repeated pornography. When it comes to repeated pornography use, there are extreme harms for the user. And some of these harms include compulsive sexual behavior, depression, career problems, relationship dissatisfaction, and other risky sexual behavior, of course. So as Clive has also mentioned, there are many cases of sex trafficking within the pornography business. And we have to remember, whenever pornography is made by force, fraud, coercion, or if the person involved is a minor under 18 years old, it is then sex trafficking. So when it comes to labor trafficking, once again, it is all about being forced, manipulated, coerced into a situation where the person is either physically or emotionally held captive for either very little pay or no pay. And we have to remember there is a difference between labor trafficking and labor violation. Within South Africa, children are actually allowed to work from the age of 16, as long as it's just adhering to the Child Protection Act or the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. So therefore, just understanding the basics of our legislation is important, but I think mostly so for those of us who work within the arena of combating human trafficking. So according to the UN's latest reports, these are the stats based on labor trafficking. And here we can see that human trafficking does not discriminate. Men are highest on the scale, and they are the main targets when it comes to labor trafficking. So just to touch on that, and this is actually a very difficult subject to touch on, but it's very important. We have to be conscious consumers. Some of the top products that are obtained through labor trafficking, somewhere in the production line, there is slave labor involved. One is mica, which is one of the ones that are very well known. It's actually a mineral that's formed in rock, but it's very much used in sparkly makeup, some electrical equipment, neon lights. So this is a very sad one for me, I must be honest. And then cobalt, for instance, which is found in rechargeable batteries. Then there's bricks, there's coffee, there's cotton, diamonds, fish, clothing, gold, pornography, of course, stones such as the crushed stones and some of the beautiful stones that many people use in their gardens, for instance, sugarcane, tobacco. Now, I know it's almost too much to try and comprehend, and it's almost impossible to avoid. However, one of the ways that we can just play a role in trying to not be part as much when it comes to labor trafficking is to support local. Okay, to carry on with the different faces of human trafficking. So we have domestic servitude. Now, domestic servitude is very rampant in South Africa. And we have seen that from reliable sources such as our National Human Trafficking Hotline. And this happens when a person appears to be or is a domestic worker. It can be within a home, it can be a B&B, a hotel, it can be garden work. However, that person is being controlled, exploited, abused, and possibly not even paid anything whatsoever. Then there's forced marriage, which is also very, very popular and common in South Africa. An example, for instance, is ikutwala. So ikutwala is actually a beautiful causa practice, but it has been distorted throughout the years, where a young girl is now being forced and truly abducted from her family to be given to an older man for sexual exploitation or so-called marriage. Then we have forced begging, which is unfortunately also quite high on the radar in South Africa. Many individuals, especially the more vulnerable, such as women and children, are forced to beg by traffickers. And the way this is done is if they do not return with money or with food, they will suffer some form of consequence. Then we have organ harvesting, where victims' bodies are used for organ removal and for the illegal trade of body parts or organs. Then we have baby harvesting, often, especially within the Black community. Ladies are either forcibly impregnated in order for the baby to be sold after birth, or where a lady is expecting multiple babies, they are often manipulated and coerced into, getting rid of one or more of the babies, or the babies are even stolen. Then we have child soldiers, which is something that does not happen across our borders into our country, but it definitely does happen that some of our children are taken across borders to areas where there's lots of conflict. Forced illegal activity, which just speaks for itself. This is extremely rampant across the globe and within South Africa. We know that South Africa is one of the countries with the highest crime statistics. And that's, once again, only statistics that the authorities are aware of. Then snuff movies, where a live stream takes place mostly on the dark web, where people are tortured and also killed on camera. And then we have bachabazi, it's also known as boy play, where young boys are exploited, they are forced to dance for older men, and they are also forced to take part in sexual gratification for these men. Okay, so more on a lighter note. So just some prevention ideas that I want to share with you. Prevention, as I said, is absolute key because, only 2% ever get extracted or ever manage to escape. And also, it's a hidden crime. So it's often very difficult to identify. So we believe that sex buyers have to be held accountable. And this is one of the fights that we as the Joseph movement needs to start fighting and need to advocate. And we want to also ask friends, family, and civil society to help us in this fight. sex buyers have to be held accountable. Then also, unfortunately, we have to expose corrupt government officials and employees. We have partners who have confirmed that there are a lot of government officials who are also part of trafficking rings and so forth. But there are a number of report lines which we can share with you, and you are welcome to just send us a WhatsApp or even ask in the chats, and we will share it with you. Quite a few lines or contact details that we can share with you if you are ever aware or told of any corrupt officials that are involved in any form of corruption, but in this case, obviously, exploitation or human trafficking. Then also we have to work towards decreasing the demand for pornography. And I strongly believe that one of the ways for us to do that is to make sure that people start realizing the dangers around using or consuming pornography. It is not just the victim that is in front of the camera. There's another victim that is in front of the screen. And that is something that I strongly believe also forms part of prevention. Then also, the root causes of many challenges within society starts at home. Therefore, we believe that parents and children need to be reached with preventative education and awareness. And that is one of the reasons why the Joseph Movement exists. And also in one of my latest slides, I will share with you some tools that can be used by parents and by teachers. Also, unfortunately, we know that there are many homes in which exploitation does take place, but it's also for this reason that we need to get into more schools. And that is also very close to our hearts as the Joseph Movement. And there are also other organizations that go into schools and do very interesting, interactive, fun little talks with the kiddies to help them recognize a dangerous person or a dangerous situation. And it also teaches them what they can do to stay safe. And also, we have to become responsible internet users. So what do I mean by responsible internet users? I think that the fact that social media and internet is just so easy to use. It is so easy to click a button. I'm sure all of us have clicked that send button, and then you almost have a heart attack because you realize what you have done. You've made a mistake. You didn't mean to share that, or you didn't mean to share it with that person. So being responsible internet users is extremely important. And we have to remember that whatever we share online, and especially on social media, is mostly accessible to the public. Also depends on your security settings. But once it's out there, you can never retrieve it. There isn't an undo button. We also have to remember that when we share pictures, especially, there can sometimes be identifiable information within that picture. It can either be on clothing, or it can be in the background. It can be found on logos. It can be found on your child's school uniform, etc. So we have to be very aware of that. And what we also find is people, especially parents, that are very proud of their children. First day at school or a new year, the children's names are used. And that is also very dangerous. So you can actually help a trafficker identify which school your child goes to, as well as give him your child's name. And up to a certain age, our children are extremely vulnerable and naive. And if a person knows where they go to school and knows their name, they are often very susceptible to trust that stranger. Also, geotagging is extremely dangerous, so we need to try and avoid that as much as we can. Also, I don't know if it relates to any of you. I hope not, but maybe some of us have been involved in this before. This is something that traffickers use very much when we share sexy or explicit images. We can actually make ourselves fall prey to sextortion. And your images can be sold or distributed. I'm mentioning this because a lot of our young people get involved in grooming online. They eventually become to like the person, which is a complete stranger to them, or even fall in love. And they start sharing explicit images. And it can eventually lead them to fall into a trap, to be tricked and be trafficked. So we also need to be vigilant, and we know this so well, but not just vigilant for ourselves. We have to be vigilant for our neighbor. We have to be vigilant for the people down our road, the people in our communities. And if we are suspicious of anything, or if we see anything, we have to do it. We have to do something. If you see something, do something. And I'll show you what it is that you can do. Another way of assisting in prevention is, of course, follow the Joseph movement on social media. Like us, share our posts. We share so much valuable information, which can actually help save a life. Just that one post will give a person information that will help them open up their eyes, or it will plant a seed, and hopefully they will distribute it as well. And it could possibly save a person from falling into a trap. And then also invite us to speak at your school or a school that you have contact with, or with any group of people or children. We are very happy to do that. And in our talks, we provide many, many preventative tips as well as tools. So the tools that are available to us. One of the most important tools that we have is our National Human Trafficking Hotline number. And this number should be taught the way we teach our children, 10111. 0800 222 777. It is luckily quite an easy number to remember. For safety's sake, you can save it on your cell phone, teach it to your children. And this hotline number can be used. You can phone it anonymously, and you can phone this number if you are suspicious of a human trafficking situation taking place down the road in your community, right next door. Or, for instance, if you often see a group of children begging and you suspect that they are possibly being exploited, you can also report that. As I say, you can do it anonymously, and you can give the hotline all the details you have. What they then do is they then disperse it to their people that work on the ground. They gather more data. That will then be escalated to be investigated by the Hawks. And I can tell you that the Hawks do absolute brilliant work. I know that many people say that the police is corrupt, and I can say with absolute honesty and without fear, yes, there are many, many corrupt police officials However, we are very grateful that we can work with the Hawks. So another tip is, if you are for certain aware of a human trafficking situation or an abuse situation that takes place, especially when it comes to children, as I said, you are obligated legally to report it. You have to, unfortunately, go to your nearest police station, open a case, get the case number. You are not allowed to be shown away. Once again, if you're shown away, you can report it, and that will also be on the information that we can share with you when it comes to corrupt officials. But they are not allowed to show you away whatsoever. If they do show you away, just go to another police station. You can do that. You don't have to be in the same jurisdiction. But the main reason why you have to report it is to get that case number. You then phone the human trafficking hotline. You give them the case number and all the details around the case. And then they will work actively with SAPS and will then escalate it to the Hawks. So that is only in a case of when you are sure that the situation is human trafficking. And then, of course, there's the tip-off line. The Salvation Army also has a human trafficking help desk number. And then Missing Children SA is also a number that can be used. But they deal with missing children specifically if human trafficking has been eliminated. So there's a lovely safety app which can be downloaded for free. It's called Namola. It has some lovely features, but the best feature of this app is the panic button. If you want to use Namola for any other uses, because they have many, many features, there will then be a smaller fee involved. But if you use the free version, you can use the panic button. So that is a wonderful tool to use. And they are actually linked with private security companies that do the service at no cost. So that's a lovely app. So I want to encourage you, please, if you don't have it on your phone, please download it. What I do is I have it on my home screen, and I often practice how to get to it very quickly without looking. So it's almost like practicing drawing a gun or a knife or anything that you might carry on yourself for self-defense, or a taser or whatever it might be. And then Custodio by IME is also a lovely software, a parental control software that one can use on various devices, laptops, computers, cell phones, and so forth, which is a wonderful tool for parents to use. So I would also encourage you to go look at that. And then also very interesting, this global hand signal that was actually doing its rounds on social media during the first half, I think, of COVID. It's the hand signal that we should teach our children and that we should also practice. So it's very simple. You lift up your palm, you tuck in your thumb, and you close your hand. If you are in a situation, if you are in a vehicle, if you are in a home by a window, if you are taken out to a restaurant or whatever the case might be, and you are in a very uncomfortable situation, you are being exploited, you are being forced, this is a very nice hand signal to use. And I believe that we need to make the signal even wider known and well known, because it can definitely save many, many lives. And yes, so that is all from me. I hope that you have learned something new today. And I really want to encourage all of you to please follow us on social media. Also go visit our websites where you will find our events and workshops page and see all the interesting events that we have planned for the year, including a tea party against trafficking, which is going to be lots of fun. There's also events for the men. So yes, so please do support us in that. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tershia. That was wonderful. I was laughing now when the dogs were barking because it just reminded me that somewhere along the line, someone is going to sponsor us a nice little studio to do these workshops in. Anyway, okay. Then I want to say that online there's also there's a place called, and it sounds hectic, but it's XXX Church, and they go out to assist people who's got porn addictions, etc. And they've also got software that you can put on, filtering software. There's Covenant Eyes, and then there's Safe Surfer. And this is absolutely important for our children today. Our children are, the average age is between 8 and 10 years old when they stumble upon these things. And then they go into a trauma, I'm not talking about human trafficking per se, but pornography, which obviously is linked at the end of the day. But it is so important that we have filtering software on our phones, on our laptops, etc. So those are also places you can look at. And then something that I've found for myself, I just want to comment on this, is that sometimes we're uncertain. Is this job offer that we just saw on our phone or on our child's phone, for instance, is it fake? Is it someone trying to traffic my kid? And if you're scared to actually pick up the phone and call, you can email the National Human Trafficking Hotline. So you can take a screenshot and you send an email to info@0800-222-777.org.za. And something that I'm trying to teach my kids, just to make it easy and give little hand signals for them to remember. So with 111, we've got, how do we do that? It's 111. I can't remember because I know the number, but with the 0800 number, the National Human Trafficking Hotline number, it's 0800 222 777. So it's a sort of a hand signal. Now it's the same with the email. So it's info@0800-222-777.org.za. So you guys are welcome to email them as well. Email us if you're uncertain, and we'll do what we can. Everything does go through them. It doesn't go through us, but we can at least just give advice.